On today's show, we're going to get into some more, the most interesting teams in the NBA. I polled everybody on Twitter. I'm at Locked On Mavs. Go follow us there. Who are the most interesting teams in the NBA? Which teams are you most interested in other than the Dallas Mavericks? We've done 6 teams from the Eastern Conference over the last 2 days. And so today we're taking the 3 most interesting teams according to you in the Western Conference. We're talking to Wes Goldberg of the Locked On Warriors show about the Golden State Warriors. We're talking to Brendon Kleen about the Phoenix Suns. We're talking to Matt George about the Sacramento Kings. Lots of interesting things about all 3 of those teams. We'll get into that on today's Locked On Mavs.
I'm Luka Doncic, and this is Locked On Mavericks podcast.
The Dallas Mavericks are NBA champions. Bang! Bang! It's good! And the Mavericks have won the game!
If you don't believe, you shouldn't be here.
And welcome. You're locked on to the Dallas Mavericks. My name is Nick Angstadt, media member and coordinator for the Locked On Podcast Network. And joining me today, 3 hosts across the Locked On NBA channel. Lots of good stuff. We're talking to Wes Goldberg from the Golden State Warriors. What is going on with Klay Thompson? When is he going to play? Are people too high on the Golden State Warriors? Because I think some people are way too high on them. Talking about their top 4, top 3 seed automatic in the Western Conference. The Mavericks, are they better than them right now? Let's get into that. Do they have a trade up their sleeve? Lots of good stuff from him. Brendon Kleen of the Locked On Suns podcast. What does this Suns team look like? What is their biggest fear going into next season? Is it Chris Paul getting regressing or getting hurt, or just not turning into the player that he has been the last couple of years and regressing, or just hitting a wall? Maybe the rug gets pulled out from under him because of age. What is up with DeAndre Ayton? Lots of good stuff from Brendon Kleen. And then Matt George. Can the Mavericks win a single game against the Sacramento Kings this season? And what's going on with Marvin Bagley? Where are we at with DeAaron Fox? What do we think about him? We'll talk to Matt George about that. So first, let's get into our conversation with Wes Goldberg. All right, continuing our series of the most interesting teams in the NBA. The Golden State Warriors are interesting to people for some reason or another. I guess they got some stuff going on over there. I guess they got Steph Curry still. I guess they got Klay Thompson coming back. Wes Goldberg, Locked On Warriors. How you doing? What you got for me?
I'm good, man. The season is a little while away, not as short as last offseason, but feels like we got like a regular offseason kind of in the books for the most part. And now we're getting back on the regular schedule, which I really appreciate.
It did, and then it still snuck up on me. It was still
Right?
like, oh dang, because like you go into an offseason like this, and you're like, all right, we have all these plans for shows in the offseason, and then you're like, oh, I only have a week left. I can't do all these other plans I was gonna do. Like,
Right.
you run out of that. Let's talk about this Golden State Warriors team. I think the first question for everybody: what's the status of Klay Thompson? When is he gonna come back? When are they at least expecting him to be back? Because you hear some people talk about the Warriors and like, oh, they're definitely top 3. Klay will be back, blah, blah, blah. And there's other people that say, well, he's not supposed to come back till Christmas or something like that. And so let's push the Warriors back a little bit. Let's not be so high on them right now, right out of the gate.
Yeah, I mean, look, if anybody knows when Klay Thompson's coming back, they're lying or they're from the future. And I hear the Christmas Day stuff. That was relatively new and early for a timeline. Everything that I had been hearing for the majority of his recovery process from the team and publicly, like stuff, off the side and publicly what they're saying, Steve Kerr, Bob Myers, was like 2022, early 2022.
Wow.
And then ESPN reports that they're targeting maybe Christmas Day or hopeful for Christmas Day. And I don't know, I'm not a doctor, but I'm not really sure what changed with Klay Thompson's medicals based on the schedule release, but that's the only thing that had changed between early 2022 and that Christmas Day game was the fact that, hey, the Warriors are going to be playing on Christmas, and then all of a sudden you start hearing that that Klay Thompson. So my fear is that they're going to try to rush him back. And I understand that Warriors fans, and not just Warriors fans, everybody wants to watch Klay Thompson play basketball. There's not a person that doesn't like watching Klay Thompson play. But the worst thing they could do is rush him back, right? Like you want him to be as close to what he was as possible before he got injured. And so if it is another month that has to go, then so be it. But I will say this, usually this is a 12-month type of injury. He got injured on November, what was it, 15th or something? And so a month after that would be, or 12 months after that would be, December 15th, this coming December, and give him about 10 days to get back into playing shape, I guess. I don't think that that's enough time. I think this is not just a 12-month injury because it's not just the Achilles, right? You also are rehabbing from that ACL, and you want to make sure everything's kosher before he gets back on the floor. So I I'm a little bit more hesitant on Klay Thompson returning by December. I think we're looking maybe more at mid-January, late January. But that's just, again, that's me guessing. And I'm not telling you what's going to happen. I'm not a liar, and I'm not from the future.
So 2 questions then. What does this team look like with Klay Thompson? Like, what are the expectations if he's back and he's healthy, and, you know, all your hesitancy goes out the window because you're like, oh, he's back and he's good. Yeah. But what does this team look like without him? Is it just a run back of last year, basically? What does this team look like with him and then without him?
Without him, I think it looks very similar to last year. I know that they added Otto Porter and Nemanja Bjelica. They drafted 2 guys in the lottery. All that stuff. You know, some guys are out. Kent Bazemore's not there anymore. Whatever. I think mostly they look like what they did at the end of last season, right? And that was a good team that embraced small ball. It was also a team that was without guys who were sort of getting in the way of that small ball approach, like James Wiseman, Kelly Oubre. Oubre's gone to Charlotte since then. Wiseman will be back probably at some point near the beginning of the season.
Say that for the folks in the back. The Kelly Oubre leaving is like a addition by subtraction a little bit.
A little bit. I think they're going to miss his difference-making defense. Like, he gets steals, he forces turnovers, and he does make stuff happen on offense. Now, it's not always good stuff, but he sort of gets the ball moving a little bit, gets the gears turning, so to speak. But yeah, I think that's I just don't think it was the right fit. And I'm a big Kelly Oubre fan. I just don't think it was the right fit in Golden State. Yeah, so I think it'll look a little bit like that, but it's not going to be like, they're not going to go on a tear like they did at the end of last year either, right? Again, it was a certain circumstance, soft schedule, Steph playing out of his mind. I think Steph can play out of his mind. Obviously, he's a Hall of Famer, but I don't know if he'll do that 38, 40 points per game for, all season. But so that's what they're going to kind of look like. And then when Klay does come back, obviously it's going to change a lot of sort of the calculus and the geometry on the court. Klay Thompson is still Klay Thompson. Nobody knows what he's going to look like when he comes back, but he is going to have the respect of opponents, and people are going to respect that shot. And if he just stands 30 feet out from away from the rim, then that's going to create more space than whoever's starting at shooting guard when he's not in there. So I think it'll be helpful. But to me, look, you're talking about teams. Some people think they'll be top 3. Some people think they'll be a fringe playoff team. I think they just need to make the playoffs. I don't really think it matters what seed they are, because the priority should be making sure they have Klay Thompson healthy, and then the rest of this team healthy too, by the way, because Steph is getting older, Draymond's getting older, Kevon Looney has an injury history, and he's by far their best center right now. They need to just stay healthy and be peaking at the right time as they get into the postseason, because let's remember, they're still the Warriors, but they have missed the playoffs 2 years in a row. They need to get into the playoffs.
It's been 2-3 years now that we've been saying the Warriors have a big trade in them. The Warriors have a big trade in them. I've kind of resolved to the fact that, well, they're just waiting to see what Klay looks like to come back, because they're not going to make this huge move with Klay out and without all their like chess pieces on the table, basically. Do you see them making some kind of big move? Do they have the pieces, do you think, to make a big move? Are we overblowing their prospects of, well, the Warriors have this huge move for Bradley Beal or somebody left in them?
I think the big trade has already happened. And I think the big trade was bringing in Andrew Wiggins. I think the big trade was...
I hope no Warriors fans are listening to this right now.
The Warriors are very comfortable going forward with this core without making the big swing. Look, if Bradley Beal is available or somebody of that caliber, yeah, they're always going to be in the conversation. They're going to make the phone calls. They're going to think about it. But Joe Lacob and this ownership group really does value the idea of grooming guys like Wiseman and Kuminga and Moody and Jordan Poole to take over for Steph and Klay and Draymond. Now, I am a little bit dubious and I question whether or not that's possible, given what the short-term expectations are. But that is the goal. And Joe Lacob has said publicly in interviews and after the draft, like, hey, I never thought we were going to make the big swing. We can't do it because of our payroll and all this stuff. Now, I know that a lot of people are looking at the Warriors as a big trade type of destination, but they really do believe at the top that Steph and healthy Klay and Draymond and Steve Kerr and what they have been able to do as far as the players they've been able to add since Kevin Durant left should be enough to win a championship. I don't know that it is, but they believe that it is.
Yeah, you talk about the payroll for the team. Like, that's not something we should take lightly, right? They can't just like swing and trade for somebody with this huge contract. Steph making $45 million this year, 37 for Klay, 31 for Andrew Wiggins, 24 for Draymond Green. That looks like a discount. Like the Draymond Green contract looks like, oh man, he's not getting paid anything. Still $24 million for him.
Yeah.
You've talked about that young core, the Wiseman, Moody, Kuminga. Which one of those guys do you expect to have, the best NBA career? Is James Wiseman going to come and maybe be much better than he was last year? Because I saw lots of stats on, everywhere, Reddit and Twitter and everything, where they said, the Warriors are much better when Jonathan or Wiseman doesn't play.
Yeah,
they're much better.
They were
Looney or somebody else at center.
They were one of the worst teams in the league when Wiseman was on the court, and then you take Wiseman off and you put in Kevon Looney, who's I think he's like kind of a neutral type of player. Like he's not going to.
Yeah, like wins above replacement. He is like the replacement.
0.0, right? Like that's everybody is judged at the Kevon Looney level. It's the Looney line. We can call it the Looney line. Are you above or below the Looney line? And I don't feel like now I'm like dunking on Kevon Looney, but
he's way better than everybody below the Looney line.
He is. Hey. That's a lot of players, including James Wiseman right now. And so I don't know, man. I still think that James Wiseman will be a good NBA player. I think that was probably the rookie season from hell for him. Yeah. Like nothing went right. He's 20 years old right now. He was 19 as a rookie, and he was inexperienced even for a 19-year-old, right? Like he played 3 games in college, 69 total minutes at Memphis.
Nice.
And then had to go into the NBA, no summer league, no training camp because he was out for coronavirus reasons, no preseason. And then it was like, hey, James Wiseman, guess who your first basketball game, your first time on a court in a very long time, in almost a year and a half, it's going to be against the Brooklyn Nets in Brooklyn. Like, good luck with that. And
no centers can play against them.
And hey, by the way, the second game is against Milwaukee, who went on to win the championship. So that was the worst possible way that they could. Like the Warriors mishandled Wiseman as a rookie, and they will admit that today. They had no idea but there was a little bit of trying to force the issue with Klay Thompson being out. They're like, look, let's just get Wiseman as good as possible. I think it was the wrong way to go about his development. They've revamped the player development staff for a reason. I think they're going to take a very different approach, a much more patient approach with James Wiseman in his second season. But like I said, if they can find a limited role for him off the bench, whether it's 5 minutes a half or something like that, I think there are going to be Warriors fans who are disappointed with it. But they need to, if the goal is, hey, let's compete now and then also be good 5, 6, 7 years from now with this new core that we just drafted in the last couple of years, then there's no reason to get that much from James Wiseman right now. Kevon Looney had his best year of his career last year. He showed he could be He's the perfect starting center for this group. Just let him start. Go win games and then develop these guys slowly but surely. And so with that said, to actually answer your question, Nick, I think James Wiseman will be a very solid NBA player. I wasn't that high on him even when they drafted him. I think Jonathan Kuminga can be very good if they develop him right. We'll see. The Warriors have been pretty hit or miss with their development. And I think Moses Moody is going to be like a really solid NBA player for his career. I think Kuminga has all-star type of potential, no doubt about it. Yeah. But I don't really know where he fits in right away and what that development down the road looks like.
Yeah, the Mavs are kind of doing this thing too. They have this like young core, obviously not as talented as the Warriors' young core, but like they have this team at the top, and then they have this real young core at the bottom of their bench. And the Warriors have this with Poole, Wiseman, Moody, Kuminga.
Right.
It's an interesting group. So garbage time of Warriors games should be fun.
I mean, with Dallas though, yeah, you've got that core at the top, but the guy at the very, very top is Luka Doncic, who is still young. Right. Yeah. And so that, like, it makes a little bit more sense as far as time. I know they want to compete right now, and Luka is good enough to do that. But with the Warriors, it's a little weird, right? Because I guess you could say to Luka, hey, man, like, we're building something here. But with Steph, you'd be like, hey, Steph, we're building something here. Steph's like, what are you talking about?
Well, how many, like, the difference between resources, like, the Mavs haven't put a ton of resources into that end of the, like, Josh Green is like an 18th, 19th pick. But for the Warriors, it's like, dang, you're talking a number 2 pick, a number, like, what, 5 pick?
Number 7 and a number 14.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's Joe Lacob's babies, right? Joe Lacob didn't draft Steph. Joe Lacob didn't draft Klay. Joe Lacob didn't draft Draymond. He drafted Wiseman, Kuminga, and Moody. You don't think that he's looking at that as his big win?
Dang.
Like, I'm telling you, Joe Lacob loves the idea of being Spurs 2.0, just like every team wants to be. But he really thinks that he could do it with this group in this next trio. He looks at that trio sort of just taking the baton from this trio, this historically great trio. I say good luck with that. I'm not saying it's impossible. They're definitely more physically imposing than the current trio. Maybe that's the difference there that could kind of help them, but it's a tall order, man.
Interesting. There you go. Wes Goldberg, Locked On Warriors. Going to see more stuff from him going forward. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, man.
Next, we're going to be talking to Brendon Kleen from the Locked On Suns podcast about the Phoenix Suns. Chris Paul, DeAndre Ayton, Devin Booker, great stuff from him. But before we do, does this sound familiar to you? You've got one device that lets you catch the game, another lets you stream your favorite shows. You're watching sports highlights on your phone. You just got all these different devices streaming all this different stuff all the time. And it's hard to keep track of, but I have something that'll help you get your TV together. It's called Direct TV Stream, and it brings all your live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before. So you can watch your favorite sports, movies, shows, all in one place. That means no more juggling remotes, no more needing to buy another device ever again. And the best part, there is no annual contract on this. So get rid of the clutter and the confusion. Go check out directtv.com. Get your TV together with Direct TV Stream. Again, check it out at directtv.com. Compatible device required. Content varies by package. Also, I know a lot of you have had this problem where you're playing NBA fantasy and it's just too hard to keep track of. Like sometimes even weekly NFL fantasy is hard for me to keep track of, and they only play one game a week. But with the NBA, you have sometimes a team plays 2 games in a week, and sometimes a team plays 4 games in a week. And so you're like, all right, well, this one player is obviously better than this other player. They're going to get me more stats, but they only play 2 games and the other player plays 4 games. And so you have to try and sift through all that, do all the work. And it's almost a daily thing for you to play fantasy. And you're like, I didn't get into this to play daily fantasy. I just wanted to play weekly and all that and play head to head against people. Sleeper Fantasy has figured this all out. They've made it happen. They have their own game pick. It's the most strategic fantasy basketball experience in the industry. You pick 1 game per week that your players will play. And that's the play. That's the game right there that counts for your team. And it's the same across the board. So you don't have to worry about, hey, 4 games for this player, 4 games for that player, 2 games for this player, all that kind of stuff. So check out Sleeper Fantasy. Go download the Sleeper app and start your league with friends today. You will not be disappointed in Sleeper Fantasy. Again, Sleeper Fantasy. Download the app and check out their game picks. All right, continuing our most interesting teams of the NBA, voted on by you guys. The Phoenix Suns got a couple of votes, so I got to bring on Brendon Kleen of Locked On Suns. Brendon, how are you feeling about the finals appearance Phoenix Suns right now?
I feel like I have no more sense of what happened from like May to July in Phoenix than I did as it was happening. And obviously the ending to it only made things crazier. I'm excited to see how they follow it up, and it's basically the same exact group. They are running it back completely as we thought they might, so we should have a great team on our hands again.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my first questions. What's the difference between this team and last year's team? Is it essentially, I mean, the main core is still there. Chris Paul, Devin Booker, Ayton, Bridges, they're all kind of still there, but is anything going to look different?
I'd say the main thing is they got younger. You had Dario Saric obviously go down with that ACL tear in the finals. You had Torrey Craig leave for a way, way high contract compared to what I thought he would get to go to Indiana. So role players, obviously, but they replaced them with basically Landry Shamet, more minutes for guys like Cam Johnson, maybe the debut, the kind of first time we'll see Jalen Smith, who was the number 10 pick back in 2020. Those guys figure to get Abdul Nader, who has kind of been a journeyman. He seems to be like the backup 3 on this team. So we'll see some younger pieces as opposed to those vets. I think we'll see less Frank Kaminsky than we did last year, hopefully. So that's really the main difference is they might look a little different when the bench comes in and get some new faces out there.
And they got a little smaller too, right? Like with all those guys you just mentioned, it seems like they're not going to be as...
Yeah, a little smaller, but JaVale McGee, obviously the big addition there. So they will, I mean, anyone who watched the finals knows these weird things that pop up, like not having a backup 5 really screwed them in some moments. You had to have, DeAndre Ayton had to be out on the floor a ton, but also when he wasn't out there, it was, a complete turnstile for Giannis Antetokounmpo. So I don't know if JaVale's a Giannis stopper necessarily, but he's at least a guy there, and they just didn't have anybody last season.
A Giannis stander in the wayer of, maybe.
Exactly. a Giannis Fowler. Six fouls. Yeah.
He's got 6 fouls, for sure. And NBA champion JaVale McGee, right? Like,
hey,
at least some experience somewhere.
Exactly. Who would have thought this guy suddenly being like the heady vet addition that contenders look for? If you had told us 10 years ago, we would have had JaVale McGee jumping from contender to contender and being this hyped addition. I think we would have not believed you. But he's that guy. Gold medalist JaVale McGee. You forgot one accolade for him.
Wow. Yeah, if you like you said 10 years ago, if you had to pick one between JaVale McGee, Andre Blatch, or like Jordan Crawford, like who would have been the multiple time NBA champion? Like, guy that stuck
I think
around.
you would have said none. You would have said none of the above if you had been asked.
You're like, wait, what happened to Gilbert Arenas?
Yeah, let's get that guy back. DeShaun Stevenson. Hey, there's one for you guys.
Oh, that's NBA champion DeShaun
yeah,
Stevenson.
exactly. So he got one. The Wizards are well represented. They took a circuitous route to getting their titles.
That's true. Okay, so you mentioned DeAndre Ayton and how he became just such a pivotal player on this team. What's the next step for him? How much of what he did in the playoffs and towards the end of the season can be replicable and can be improved upon this year in your eyes?
Whew, big question, because what we saw in the not just the finals, the whole postseason was not unexpected. Like if you'd watched DeAndre Ayton in the past, you've seen those flashes, but that's exactly what they were, is flashes. There was sections of all three of his first seasons that you would get excited about, maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks. It's not always been there, and even during the postseason, I don't think you can necessarily say it was always there. So it's going to be about that effort. And I think there's also that part of it too, where it's like you could be optimistic and say, well, he hasn't been able to make it through a season really at any point in his NBA career until last season, right? He had injury to end his rookie year. He only played about 65 games. Then there was the suspension and then another injury in his second season. Then the pandemic hit. So some by his own fault and some by random luck, he hasn't had that consistency. So can he build on that and use this offseason, a real training camp again? He still has Mark Bryant, who is sort of the Suns' big man whisperer, the guy that they've just said, you go work with him. And he's been there through Ayton's entire career basically now. And maybe that helps. Maybe that consistency can finally build up. But I think it's all on his plate. We know what the talent is. We know what the things he needs to do are. He needs to create shots for himself. He has to play with consistent energy, all that stuff. We all know. It's just, can he do it? Will he do it? And are the stars aligning for him?
Did you say in there that this is his first healthy offseason? That's a rule on our podcast. If you say that about a big, like a 7-footer that's been injured a lot, that this is his first healthy offseason,
I mean,
he was take a drink.
He was healthy coming off the bubble. He was healthy.
Fair.
But it was just the bubble. So it's right. Everybody's offseason was screwed up, but he was healthy. So we're not in KP territory. We're not there yet.
We are in KP territory all the time over here. Chris Paul has been, obviously he was like the linchpin of that team. Some people say he should have won MVP because he brought that team from where they were to now a finals contender. What are there any signs that he can be slowing down? Is that the biggest worry of this team? Is that maybe he, the floor drops out from under him and he bottoms out? Like, is that the biggest thing for the Suns, or is it just, hey, we trust Chris Paul. He's going to be the same player. He's going to come back and do the exact same thing he did last year.
I'm less worried about that. And part of it is him. I think he's settled into a role where, I don't know if he'll accept taking a step back in minutes. There was the famous stories of him in Oklahoma City basically just telling Sam Presti, ain't going to happen. I'm not resting. I'm not doing any of that stuff. That will sneak up on him eventually. He's not bulletproof. Nobody is. I'm not worried about it, though, mostly for the other side, which is Cameron Payne, I think, has proven himself to be a more than capable backup. I think we'll see Devin Booker. Are you laughing at Cam Payne being capable?
Because on this podcast, anytime we brought up who's the worst player in the NBA, Isaac would always say Cameron Payne, and it became this joke that anytime Cameron Payne was playing that. And so now Cameron Payne went on that crazy run in the finals and was like you said, a really important part of this team. Yeah. And we just kept giving crap to Isaac about it every day. So
we all deserve crap for doubting the guy.
True.
And he also just signed a complete undermarket deal. So I guess we're just going to keep the undervaluing of Cam Payne going, but he's more than capable. He's a guy who I trust at this point, at least to play, 20, 25 minutes, take the load off of Chris Paul. I also think Devin Booker will be able, people may not look at the numbers of Devin Booker closely, but if you do, he very much took a step back in terms of being a playmaker last year. His usage was down. His assist rate was almost cut in half. He really wasn't that type of guy. So he can be. We know he can be. He was doing it even when Ricky Rubio was here. So if they balance that out a little bit more, I just think Paul can play the same maybe number of minutes, but not have to do as much. And, maybe be a little bit fresher by playoff time. I mean, that's what we've been saying for a decade about the guy. So I'm not going to promise he won't get injured when the postseason comes around, but I'm not worried about the fall off during the regular season quite yet.
Not a lot of people are giving the Suns, I guess, credit for. It seems like both sides, right? Both the Bucks and the Suns aren't getting credit for making the finals and being the favorite this coming into this next season. Who are the teams ahead of the Suns in your eyes that you think like, okay, those are legitimate teams that are ahead, and who are the ones that you're hearing from people, maybe it's national people or other podcasters who are like, oh, they think that they're better than the Suns? Like, what are they even talking about right now?
Yeah, it's mostly in the East that I'm like looking at, frankly, and that's something I've been talking about on Locked On Suns a lot. Is it's going to be a weird regular season because I think most of the teams I'm afraid of aren't ones that the Suns are going to be able to test themselves against all that often. So, the Bucks, obviously, the Nets, obviously, the Sixers have always played them tough. That's such a question mark as a team. I have no idea really what to expect there. In the West, I think a lot is really uncertain. Like people, if you look at the championship odds, like the Warriors to make the finals, the Warriors have better odds in a lot of places, or at least they did when that stuff got unveiled.
Yeah. They got a lot of fans, though. They're getting a little, like, how Lakers are always in every single betting thing? Like, the Warriors get a little of that.
Basically, that's the sports books wanting money, and they know Warriors fans or NBA fans will just be excited to bet on Steph and Klay and everybody else. But, like, the Lakers have a lot of stuff to figure out. The Jazz, I don't trust. Like, I think the Suns will be right there as a top 2-3 seed again, and it's just going to be a matter of matchups and everything else. The West is going to be so weird, and I think the continuity factor for the Suns, and they've stayed healthy. Most of their guys are relatively healthy every year. Like, they're going to be there.
Who's the player on the Suns that people aren't talking about enough?
Cam Johnson. I think he, we saw the dunks. Like, those were unexpected during the finals, during the playoffs. A guy that we don't think of as an athlete. He was the, 30-year-old first-round pick was obviously the joke about him when he came out. But he's
25. He's 25 going into his third season.
He's basically Devin Booker's age, and Devin Booker's been in. This will be Book's 7th or 8th season. So it's wild. And he's developed into a great role player. I mean, there were times I think games during the conference finals and finals where you could say he was the best forward on the team over Crowder, over Bridges, just in terms of he's not afraid to score the ball, and that's such a problem with Mikal Bridges right now. And then Crowder just is limited for all the reasons we all know, having watched him for so long. So. Yeah. I think Cam will play a lot this year, and I think he'll kind of start to, come out of his shell. He had COVID and injury stuff last season, and he's going to be up for an extension next summer. So role player that goes under the radar, but I think he'll be a way bigger part of how people talk about the Suns this season than he has been.
There you go. Phoenix Suns basically running it back, and they were a fun team last year. They'll be fun again this year. Go listen to Locked On Suns. Follow Brendon Kleen on Twitter. Brendon, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, man.
Coming up, we'll be talking to Matt George from the Locked On Kings podcast. Somehow Matt George just continues to stay chipper and upbeat, and he still continues to stay excited about the Kings, even though they have been the Kings the last couple of years. So we'll get into that conversation with him. But before we do, let me tell you about Built Bar. Built Bar is a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. They're absolutely delicious. And Cookie Dough Chunk is a new flavor. They got 150 calories, 15 grams of protein, 6 grams of sugar, and I got the endorsement from Isaac. Sometimes it is hard to get Isaac's endorsement on food products, like most food products out there. And Isaac loves it. He really loves the Cookie Dough Chunk Bar. It's available at built.com right now. You can go check it out and use our promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off. They're great. People love them. The orange bar is going out of sale right now. Like that means if they have sale written on it, that means that they are getting rid of them, and you need to go get it fast. It's a pretty interesting bar. It's got that little not tang, I guess it's like a sweet tang sort of the orange with the chocolate. Great stuff. All the bars covered in 100% chocolate. Great stuff. Go check out built.com. Again, promo code LOCKED15, the number 15, LOCKED15. Also want to tell you about betonline.ag. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to put down some money on sports. They got lines on literally everything. You can go check out lines on basketball right now. They have NBA futures, the championship right now, Brooklyn Nets plus 260. That's moved down a little bit. They have their odds have gotten better, it seems like, over the last couple of weeks. The Los Angeles Lakers plus 325. The Bucks plus 900. The reigning champions are not even close to favorites to win the title. Golden State Warriors, we just talked to Wes Goldberg, plus 1,200. Phoenix Suns, we just talked to Brendon Kleen, plus 1,600. The Dallas Mavericks, all the way down at plus 2,200. 2,200 for the Dallas Mavericks. Let's see, who else has some odds down here? Yeah, Dallas Mavericks have better odds than the Heat, Hawks, Celtics, Bulls, Knicks. They have worse odds than the 76ers, the Clippers. The Mavs have worse odds than the Clippers to win the title. That and the Nuggets as well. That is and the Jazz. That is fascinating to me. So if you feel good about any of those, go to betonline.ag. You can go ahead and use the promo code LOCKEDON to get a 50% welcome bonus. Also, right now, use the promo code NFL100, the number 100, NFL100 to get a 100% welcome bonus. So go to betonline.ag, your online sportsbook expert. All right, continuing our series talking about the most interesting teams to Mavs fans in the NBA. This one was a little bit of a surprise to me. The Sacramento Kings came up a couple times when I asked you guys which teams were you most interested in. Matt George from Locked On Kings joining me. And Matt George, will the Mavericks actually beat the Kings at least once this season?
That's the only thing that we have to hold on to from last year. So I'm hoping no, but I do appreciate Mavs fans thinking this Kings team is interesting, because they are interesting, because nobody, even in Sacramento, knows what the hell they're going to be or how good they're going to be. They have enough talent, but as in Sacramento, talent has not been the issue over the last 15 years.
Let's start with that talent. Where are we at with DeAaron Fox? Like, is he got the big extension, and it seemed like he was going to be the next guy for Sacramento, but I've heard more about Tyrese Halliburton than I have about DeAaron Fox. Is that just like the new thing, we're interested in him now, or do we think that Halliburton's going to be better than Fox? Like, what is Fox? What do we think he is right now? Where does he stand as far as, is he the next superstar for the Kings, or is he people are just waiting for a guy to be better than him?
I love Tyrese Halliburton, but I don't think Tyrese is going to be on De'Aaron Fox's level. De'Aaron Fox took a massive leap last year, and I know a lot of people just don't watch nightly Kings basketball, because why would you, unless you're unfortunate like myself.
Getting paid for it.
Yeah, unless you're getting paid for it. Right?
Don't undersell it, right?
But De'Aaron is an absolute superstar. Like he showed it last year. He is a superstar. And when he went into takeover mode, I'm talking 30, 40 point performances, won 2 Western Conference Player of the Week awards. During those stretches, the Kings were beating everybody left and right, not just the Mavericks. They were beating everybody. And for some reason, the Kings still had an impressive record against good teams last year. It was playing the bad teams and the 2 9-game losing streaks randomly they went on when De'Aaron wasn't playing so well. That knocked this team down a peg. But De'Aaron is an absolute star. I expect him to be in the running for All-Star. I'm not going to guarantee that he's going to make it All-Star in the Western Conference, because it's so difficult to do in the West with the amount of guards and how talented the Western Conference backcourts are. But De'Aaron should be in the running. He should be in the conversation. And he said it himself at the end of last season that he knows, or he understands now, that in order to be a star in the NBA, on nights that you're not great, you have to be at least good. And he was trying to figure that out last year. This year, I expect him to have it figured out. He shared with us in his media scrum today that he's put on even more weight. He's even stronger. He's almost at 200 pounds, which is where he'd like to be. He's at like 197 or something like that, which is over 30 pounds more than he was at the draft combine. Yeah. So man's put on muscle, and man's beefy now.
Yeah, we kind of forget, or we didn't even notice, De'Aaron Fox, 25 points a game last year, 7 rebounds for him, and he shot the 3 decently well, like 32%. He's like he's getting up there to where it's not a complete liability for him anymore. It's maybe not where you want it to be, but he's at least shown to be decent in that area, and he plays games. Like, he just doesn't miss a ton of games either. It's been pretty cool to see his elevation and to see his improvement. So he is like he is the guy that the Kings are building around. Like, you're comfortable saying that they're building around him.
Well, if you're going to give a guy a max contract, you damn well better be building around and not think that he's a second. I like the thing is, and I did a podcast earlier talking with Sean Coleman from Locked On Grizzlies, and we talked about De'Aaron Fox versus Ja Morant, and who would you rather start with, and who's better today? And to me, it's clearly De'Aaron Fox. The difference is that Ja Morant got a stage that Fox hasn't had yet, and to Ja's credit, Ja performed very, very well on that stage. I mean, averaged 30 points for the postseason or something like that, 30 points per game. That's phenomenal. My thing is, and this is a tough argument to make because he hasn't obviously been there yet, but when De'Aaron gets that stage, hopefully it's with the Sacramento Kings, but when he gets that stage, and hopefully it's this year, he's going to shine, and he's going to show everybody. Like, I'm convinced that if De'Aaron Fox was in almost any other market, but put him into like a mega market that's not one of these super teams, put him in like Chicago is the example that I've been using a lot. Everybody's talking about De'Aaron Fox. Everybody knows his name. And in the Eastern Conference, he's a multi-time All-Star by now. Like that, he is that good of a player. And I'm really not just overhyping him because of the Sacramento perspective. He is that good. And I guarantee you all 30 NBA teams would love to have him. And I think he can be a number one guy on a really, really good team. I don't know if I'm ready to say championship team yet, but a really, really good deep playoff team. He can be the number one guy in my opinion.
What are the expectations for this Kings team? Like, where are we at with them? Are they just going to be bottom dwellers again? It feels like a lot of, at least Mavs fans and people, maybe not Mavs fans because of last season, but just kind of write them off and say, all right, that's going to be another team in the basement, in the bottom. But what are the expectations for this team that actually like has some good talent around now? Like Harrison Barnes still there. We just mentioned DeAaron Fox. He's had an incredible season last season. They re-signed Rashawn Holmes. Buddy Hield's still there, and he's an incredible shooter. You got Tyrese Halliburton. You bring in Davion Mitchell. You got some talent there. What are the expectations for this team from Kings fans and from maybe yourself?
It doesn't surprise me that people write the Kings off because they have to earn the right to not be written off, essentially. But the Kings have made the bar very, very clear, which I appreciate. Last year, we heard all this talk about, we'll see what you have in Marvin Bagley. And is Tyrese Halliburton going to be any good? And you have a young team, develop them. And it's a gap year, and there's not going to be fans, so it's okay if you lose, blah, 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 blah. There's none of that crap this year. And it's been made very clear by both head coach Luke Walton and general manager Monte McNair. It's playoffs or bust for this team. Now, they don't care how they make it, and I don't count the play-in and getting eliminated as making the playoffs. If they go through the play-in route, that's great, but they actually have to make the playoffs. I'm talking a 7-game series, making round one of the legitimate playoffs itself. Play-in isn't good enough. It's playoffs or bust for the Sacramento Kings team, and they have the talent to do it. Now, many argue that had the Kings had the bench that they had the second half of last season for all of last season, they would have been in the play-in game. And the fact that they went on 2 separate 9-game losing streaks and still finished only a couple games out is ridiculous. It shows, one, how vulnerable the West is with a play-in. Now that up top it's untouchable, but with the play-in, God, over half the teams in the NBA freaking make the, well, they already did, but even more of the teams in the NBA seem to make the playoffs. The Kings have to find their way.
That's not a thing you should be mad about, by the way.
No, absolutely not. It's great. I love the play-in. I just think the Kings, if they're going to make the play-in, that's not good enough. And trust me if I say, Nick, if the Kings don't make the playoffs, like heads are going to roll. Heads are going to roll. And it starts with
Luke Walton, or is there anybody else?
It starts with Luke Walton. Now, Monte McNair committed to him, but didn't give him any kind of contract extension. He's in year 3 of his original 4-year deal that Vlade signed him to when he was hired. So it's a lot easier to get rid of a guy when he only has 1 year left than when he still has 2 years left, especially in a financial pinch like COVID. So Luke Walton's head will roll. If the Kings are bad, Luke Walton won't last till the trade deadline, which no Kings fan should be rooting for, no matter how much you hate Luke Walton. And then honestly, I wonder how much pressure is on Monte McNair. Now, I think it would be ridiculous for a first-time GM to be fired after really 1.5 off seasons that he's had with this Kings team, and an abbreviated season at that. But the patience of Sacramento is tapped by fans, by ownership. Ownership is under massive fire right now because the majority of these losing seasons are now under this ownership group and not the Maloofs, the previous ownership group. So the patience is tapped here. And the Kings have to make the playoffs. That is the expectation. And Nick, if they don't, it's nothing short of a catastrophic failure. That's where it is. Doesn't matter how many times they've lost in the past. Catastrophic failure if this team doesn't make the playoffs. It's that simple, and it's relieving to be that simple.
You mentioned before, last season was about, do we know what we have in Marvin Bagley? Did we know? Did we see? Do we know what we have in Marvin Bagley? His numbers to me are actually pretty wild. Like 14 points a game every single year, 25 minutes a game every single year, 7 rebounds a game every single year, like just about 1 assist every single year. It's like his numbers have just been the exact same like the entire time in the league. Like maybe those aren't indicative of who he is, but what do we have in Marvin Bagley? And there was all the rumors with I remember you did the episode with his dad and talking about his dad's comments and all that kind of stuff, him wanting out of Sacramento. We know what we have in Marvin Bagley, and what is he?
We do know what we have in Marvin Bagley. We have a injury-prone, high upside big man who has freakish athletic ability and can honestly average a double-double in his sleep if he wants to, but he's entitled. He's surrounded by a bunch of yes men that aren't leading him correctly, in my opinion. Whether it's his family, his camp, it does not matter. And he and his camp, I believe, are doing the only thing that they had left to save face after getting injured again twice last season. And that is blaming the organization that has missed the playoffs for 15 straight years. I mean, the Kings are low-hanging fruit. They're bottom of the barrel. So it's easy to point at them and try and put all the attention on the Kings and how crappy that organization has been instead of, taking ownership for the fact that you can't stay on the basketball court. Marvin,
that may sound familiar for some Mavs fans.
Yeah, Marvin is still an extremely talented player. I still think the Sacramento Kings are his best chance to work his career out, certainly to get another contract. And for the Sacramento Kings, they could desperately use a guy like Marvin Bagley. Their biggest hole right now is at the 4 spot. And I personally wouldn't want the Kings to start Marvin right out of the gate. I'd rather him come off the bench and put up empty stats and prove that he can, 1, stay healthy, and 2, play a lick of defense before he makes his way into the starting lineup or even a closing lineup. He still has a long way to go in that sense, but I still think he can be a great fit here in Sacramento. But the reality is Marvin Bagley is no longer part of the core. The general manager who drafted him is no longer here. So there's no desperation anymore to make it work out. The Kings already look foolish for taking him over Luka or Trey or whoever you want to say there. And that, I mean, the Bleacher Report redraft didn't even have him in the lottery, which is not surprising at all. He's not reliable. And if you can't be reliable, then you can't be a good player in the NBA.
There you go. Sacramento Kings, some interesting stuff, some interesting players. There seems to be a playoff mandate. That's going to be really interesting to watch. There you go. Listen to Matt George, Locked On Kings, if you want any more info on the Kings and the drama that ensues. Man, there's a move coming, right, with Bagley or Buddy Hield, or there's got to be one coming soon.
Unless the Kings are massively overperforming and we're talking like 10 games over 500 at the trade deadline, if one of those two guys isn't gone at the trade deadline, I would be shocked. Absolutely shocked.
There you go. That's enough to go and follow Locked On Kings. Go follow him on Twitter as well.